Hello, my name is Michael and I'm a composer of classical music. I'd like to say a few words today about how I begin a piece of music. And I think initially it will depend on, of course, what type of piece it's going to be, whether it's going to be a series of short pieces for a solo instrument, or a chamber work, say for string quartet, or indeed a larger scale work. But I think there are two very important divisions at the beginning. Whether the opening is going to have a structural role or whether I am setting up the piece of music purely atmospherically. Within structure, probably the most famous example is Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, where those first four notes play such a vital role throughout the movement. But within atmosphere, I would refer briefly to a work that I did many years ago for choir and orchestra, which took environmental issues and global warming and climate change as the basis. And the librettist and I just wanted to start from absolute silence, the beginning of the universe. And so I used the very soft low notes of double basses, and then a scratching sound of a capacitor to kind of indicate the beginnings of life. And then that wonderful sound of a tam-tam, when it's straight down the side, it produces a very ethereal, almost gentle explosion of sound that is like the universe just suddenly bursting into life. So the first example of my music that I'm going to really talk about today is based more on the importance of structure. And it was, in fact, the very first piece that I went public with, and that it was performed by the Illusive Piano Trio at the Purcell Room in London. And you can tell from that that it is actually a piano trio. Now, I wrote this work while I was doing my doctorate in composition, and so I think that's probably, looking back, why the structure of the work was so important. At the time, I had no particular musical style. I was kind of floundering around and also intimidated by just the very word composer, because that always seemed great men rather than women in history that could just hear their piece of music and write it down. So I felt intimidated by the whole thing and reverted to sonata form, which was a very established musical form for this work. So let's have a listen to just the first idea that I started the piece with, and then I will put it in context of how it suited the rest of the piece, or fitted to the rest of the piece. So here we go. Some lovely playing there, and we recorded it actually during COVID with the Aquinas Piano Trio with Ruth Rogers on violin, Catherine Jenkinson cello, and Martin Cousins piano. As I say, structurally, the number 3 really was paramount throughout the work. I had 3 subjects at the beginning, and the first subject that you've just heard was used on its own for the rest of the first movement. The second idea was used only for the second movement, and the third idea was used only for the third movement. And this again was split up into multiples of 3 as well. So there is an example of where structure at the opening of a piece plays a role throughout. So where did the idea come from? Well, I suspect that it came from my sitting at the piano. And I ought to say that I am the most awful pianist. And as a result, I think this probably works to my advantage because my fingers don't form any set patterns when I sit at the piano. And it's quite random, really, what might come out. And so if something happens that seems appropriate or what I like, then I will take that and then write it down and work with it. And I think that's probably what happened at the beginning. I was looking for something quite energetic, quite happy, quite lively, and probably that came out, and I thought that would be sufficient.